Here's what Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol got right and what it got wrong. Christmas Carol, it's a classic, right? There's so many different versions, whether it's old school, movies, The Muppets, you have Scrooge with Bill Murray, and actually we have a new favorite in our house, Spirited. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Ryan Reynolds. It's a musical kind of new take on A Christmas Carol, and it's a fantastic movie. And I often talk about business strategy and leadership and that sort of thing, but you've also heard me talk before about how, when I've worked with executive coaches in the past, it's oftentimes working on me, working on limited beliefs, working on self-doubt, working on letting go of control and all of these things. And through this journey, I'm someone who, reads some kind of self-development, mindfulness, consciousness type book every night as much as possible, meditate morning and night, especially throughout the week, weekends, I let it slide from time to time. But, it's a big part of my personal growth and how I try to live my daily life. And let's be honest, I'm not perfect. And, that's one thing that frustrates me so much sometimes about some of the influencers that are out there who call people losers and say, if you're, basically just have this mindset that if you're not as successful as they are, you are a loser. And the reason why it bothers me so much is because, one thing I've learned as I've gotten to know some of these influencers and I've gotten to know some kind of gurus that are out there is, when they're talking about stuff, all of us, we're shoveling our own shit, right? Like I talk about things that I've done throughout my career and I've learned and I've grown from, leadership, micromanagement, like all of these things, right? Like these are things that I have worked on. And so when I see these individuals ignore these aspects, right? Like ignore that, they've grown and learned, right? It didn't happen overnight. It really bothers me. And I to be honest with you, I would actually even say that, some of these top ones who really kind of spout this loser mentality and push that while recognizing why people hold themselves back. Like I believe it's because of something that they are still struggling with, that they have not faced. When you have an addiction to drugs when you're younger and you turn that addiction to money, is that any healthier? Sure, it's not illegal, I guess, but so many of them are actually still struggling with things I think they've never faced. And, as throughout I hate to say this, my spiritual journey and of mindfulness and meditation, all that type of stuff, I really started thinking about what are the ghosts that haunt us? In the Christmas Carol, to circle back to that, the Christmas Carol is all about, these three ghosts that visit us, the past, present, and future. And I really began to think about that. And, I don't want to go too deep in some of these topics here, but, looking at the past, it's over. It's done. The past does not actually haunt us. What haunts us is our view of the past, right? Like what we did and what we've done is over. And for the majority of what haunts us about the past, it's all subjective. It's relative, right? It's our perception of something, right? We see people all the time who have something bad happen to them, or maybe it's not horrible, right? But they get into a car accident, they get laid off from a job, they get fired from a job, something happens in their life and they just rebound, right? And other people just stay dwelling in it. It goes to showcase the fact that what happens in our past, sure, there's pieces that are going to affect us, right? I don't want to take away the sensitivity and empathy when something really is bad happening, especially in a very personal way. But how we respond to what occurred to us is what really determines whether or not we move forward or stay stuck in the past. Because at this point, the past no longer exists. It's something that exists in our brain, in our memories, but it doesn't exist anymore in reality. And so what really haunts us about the past is actually just our perceptions of that. So you have to learn to get beyond your perceptions and places where you messed up. Like there are some times that early on in my young adult life, college, etc., where I did not do everything I should have done. I hate using the word regrets, but I could easily look back and regret things that I did. But it all kind of makes who you are, right? And I'm happy where I am and what I've done. And, I'm someone who kind of believes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And we got to learn to move on from our past. And then I'm also going to jump to the future. A lot of our fears and our anxieties are things that haven't happened yet. I remember when I first started consulting, and that was the first time in my career where what I was doing, the money I was bringing in, like a client could fire you within 30 days, right? Yes, your employer can as well, but there's usually an understanding of a longer term relationship unless something, goes south, right? But consultants are expungible, right? Like if you're not hitting your budget numbers, let the consultants go, right? There isn't the same thought process of letting a consultant go. And I remember early on, I had a client that every time I'd get a text from my point of contact saying, "Hey, do you have time for a phone call?" Immediately my head was like, I'm being fired. I'm being let go. And you know what? That probably happened 19 times and it never happened. And it was my fear of anxiety about something that wasn't real. And when we have in a place where we have self-doubt and limitations of ourselves and live in a place of fear and anxiety about what we don't know, we kill our potential. Because, being stuck in those moments and, quite frankly, just being down on it, that consumed my mind. Like if that call wasn't happening for another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, like that is all my brain thought about was, crap, I'm being fired. So then I'm starting to think like how am I going to replace this client? And like, I got nothing done in that time frame because I'm so worried and anxious that this is going to happen. And then again, 19 out of 20 times, it never happened. It was all for nothing. The past isn't real because it doesn't exist anymore other than our minds. And the future isn't real because it's not written yet. We don't know what's going to happen. And regardless of what you think, having fear and anxiety about things that haven't happened yet is not a healthy way to do it. Having fear and anxiety does not make the situation change different or better. So it's best to just stay present. Don't get caught up in what may happen, what may not happen in the future, and stay present. Which leads me to the third ghost, the present. Now, there's an element of the present, when we can live in the present, not live in the past, not live in the future, we're much more sound. We're grounded, right? There is less that affects us because there's rarely external factors that affect us in the present. Sure, like again, you get hit by a car, get in a car accident, that is a real-time, issue that happens. But if you think about it, the fear, the anxiety, the mental anguish that often occurs from those incidents is thinking the next day or 2 days on the road, oh crap, my car is going to be totaled. I'm not going to have my car this week to go to this meeting. I'm going to have to pay a deductible. The future thoughts are what haunt us even in a present moment, right? It's not the actual car accident. The car accident happened, right? The minute it happened, it's in the past, right? What's going to happen in 5 minutes, in an hour, the next day, the next week is in the future. But what haunts us in the present is ourselves. It's the stories we tell ourselves. It's the self-doubt. It's the self-belief. It's me being consumed, right? Like, yes, that was about a future incident that I was worried about, but it was about my mindset in that time. And one of the biggest things that I've had to come and learn and grow about as someone who's always been ambitious and good at school and good at sports, when I was 36 years old, I was, running a $8 million organization with 30 staff, my dream job at the time, but I wasn't where I wanted to be. I thought I should be further along in my career. Thought I should be making more money. And when I could switch to consulting early on, I started doing a lot of entrepreneurial groups and hang out with people and talking to people my age and even younger that are making 2, 3, 10 times what I'm making. And like, that's when my self-doubt stepped in. People always say that, if you hang around with 6 people, you become the 7th, or whatever the number is. If you hang out with 6 drug addicts, you become the 7th. If you hang out with 6 successful people, you become the 7th. But the problem is that when you're hanging out with very successful people and you haven't learned to combat your inner demons, your inner thoughts, then what you become is, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not as successful as these people, which is not about necessarily the past or the future. It's about what your mind is telling you about who you are. And I read a book called The Soul Without Shame that was recommended to me that changed my life. It began me on this entire spiritual journey. And what it really taught me was, again, when something's happening, when a fear strikes, that I used to be consumed by it, and it would set me back, and I'd have the anxiety and the worry and that sort of thing. And what I learned is like I had to recognize these thoughts. I had to recognize that they weren't real. That there is a subconscious part of your mind. Again, I can talk all day about what I've read about the evolutionary aspects of this, psychology aspects, but in a sense, like that voice inside your head that pops in that you don't control, that just shows up uninvited, you're unaware of until it happens, is your subconscious mind, and that's just from programming, dating back to, through the history of the human race and in evolution, as well as your childhood, your upbringing. The status by the time you are 35 years old, I think it's 95% of all your actions, emotions, and decision making are habits. You're not even thinking about them. They're subconscious habits. And so we have to learn to recognize that these voices that are popping in our head, they're telling us we're not worthy, that we're not where we should be, that all these negative thoughts about ourselves, we have to learn to recognize them, notice them for what they are and why they do exist, realize that they're no longer there to help us, and move beyond. When I've looked at my life, as an adult, I can honestly say that every time I really needed something came. Like back when I made no money, I had law school debt, undergrad debt, and just very, very thin budget to work on. And I'm down to my last couple $100s. I would get one of those random checks in the mail that I was a part of some kind of class action lawsuit that I didn't even know I was a part of, right? Like when I look at my life, I can see that the universe has always provided. And I truly believe it does. When you keep a positive mind and don't get bogged down into self-doubt, self-worry, that sort of thing. And that's what I really had to base it on. When I get worried about money, it's never today. It's always in the future. But I get worried about things in the present that my worry about the future affects me in the present. And that's what you have to work on. And so what I really started doing was having this mantra of like, I have no needs. There's literally nothing in the world that could happen to me that I couldn't survive financially. Like I have money in the bank, I have investments, I have a 401k I could always tap into that you don't want to. Like there's literally nothing in this world that could happen to me that would devastate me financially. So I learned to combat the self-doubt and subconscious thoughts and minds. And then from the financial standpoint of where I want to be and where I want to go, is start with a place of gratitude. If you start from a place of gratitude that you're alive, like if you have nothing else, say I'm alive today, or I have a family that loves me, or I love my family, or whatever it may be. For me, talking about finances is because I think about my finances all the time because I'm trying to grow them. Like I have to remind myself, like I have everything I need. Like all my worries is because I want to be 10x where I am, which I'm going to shoot for and go for. But I don't have to be anxious and worried about that because I know that no matter what happens to me financially today, in this moment, I'm going to be okay. So we got to learn to recognize these three ghosts that haunt us, the past, the present, and the future. We have to realize how they affect our mind, how they affect our actions, how they hold us back from truly achieving what we want. And we can learn to understand why they exist, what they are. You can't reject them, right? Again, a lot of this is subconscious. You can't reject it, but you have to let it in, recognize why it exists, and then let it out. And then when you change your mantra, you change your mindset, be on gratitude, be on the universe always provides, all of these type of things that have worked for me, and you got to find out what works for you. You're able to live a much lighter, happier, less anxiety-driven life, which in return helps you propel things forward because you can go into the unknown without worry. You can take on new challenges. When there's a setback in your business or there's a lull in your business and money's not coming in right now, you know that you have enough in the bank. You know that money's always going to come, that you can trust that every time that you've needed money, something's come up. You've always been to find new clients. You have to find these ways to not get buried down in the self-doubt, the negative beliefs of yourself and your circumstances, and just truly learn to move forward. And that is truly not just as an individual, but as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a manager, as a CEO. All of these things, if you learn to combat these ghosts in your life, recognize them, and then transition away from those negative views to positive ones, it will brighten up your life, it will help your organization grow, and you to be a much more better leader.